Hi, it's Maggie the Irish Gypsy here to bring you your June 2019 mid-month general readings. We're looking at the last half of June here. Welcome to any newcomers and first-timers, and welcome back to followers and subscribers. Thanks for taking the time to tune in today, and for those of you who send in your support, feedback, and comments, thank you. And always a big note of gratitude to all of my clients out there for keeping me so busy with personal one-on-one readings. It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, both my regular and new clients. And if any of you are interested in scheduling a personal reading with me, live or recorded, you can get more info and contact details by clicking on the description link below or clicking on the About button you'll find on my YouTube channel's homepage. I do a wide variety of readings of all different types and lengths in all the main areas of life. So if you're interested, send me an email. I can usually respond to your initial inquiry within the same day or the first 24 hours with more info. And scheduling is pretty timely too. I do readings full-time, 6 days a week. It's all that I do. So I'm pretty diligent at working with everyone's schedules and mine to get you readings as quickly as possible. So shoot me an email and we will go from there. All right, let's move right into this reading. This is for our beautiful crabs, our Cancerians, the water sign of Cancer, for the last half of June 2019. Let's take a look at what the remainder of June has in store for you, Cancer. As many of you know, general readings always resonate a little different for everyone. So if you know your rising sign, moon sign, Venus sign, watch those as well. It can be very helpful in providing additional clarification. Okay, Cancer. June mid-month for Cancer. We begin with the moon, our watery moon, followed by the Ten of Wands. We have the King of Swords, followed by the Eight of Wands, sorry, I'm just processing something that came in. And from the bottom of the deck, your overall energy for the last half of June is the Nine of Swords. Never a card I really like to see, the Nine of Swords. A lot of stress, anxiety, worry, obsessive thinking, compulsive thinking, like thinking about the same thing over and over and over again, possibly keeping you up late at night, fear, stress, anxiety, worry. The source of it might be valid, but the Nine of Swords usually comes up when you're overthinking it. You're in fear of a future which hasn't happened yet, and you're always imagining the worst possible outcome or just thinking about it over and over and over again. And every time you do, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's this enormous thing in your head, but that isn't really reflected in the reality of it. So a lot of this energy can be lessened and cut down by recognizing that it's just the fears going on in your head and this perhaps circular obsessive thinking. One of the best ways to combat this kind of stress, anxiety, depression, fear is by action and using logic and practical things to kind of talk yourself through it. If you're worried about what if this happens or what if this doesn't happen, well, it hasn't yet. You can prepare as best as you can and then let the rest of it go. Let's pull some clarifying cards to see what this Nine of Swords is about. Although I feel like a lot of you Cancerians, and it might be because a lot of you tend to be maybe emotionally intuitive about your own feelings and other people's feelings. I know a lot of the water signs, Cancer in particular, can be maybe hypersensitive to other people's emotions and emotional spaces, and neglect or are afraid to speak in a certain way or be completely honest and clear if they feel it might hurt someone or cause conflict of some kind. And that might be the situation here, because I feel like a conversation needs to be had in a very clear and concise manner about how you feel about something which looks like a real burden or a struggle, and you're just thinking, is this going to last forever? But I think that there's a conversation that needs to take place which hasn't yet and needs to, and that communication needs to be very clear. That's pretty much kind of sums up the reading here. But let's clarify this Nine of Swords first. Well, not first. Let's just clarify it now, because I've told you pretty much the bulk of what I'm seeing here. But let's see if we can see what the stress, anxiety, worry is. Okay. Well, we had two come out, and I'm going to stick with those. So what is all of this about, Cancer? We have two major arcana cards, actually, which represents that this is a pretty significant thing in your life, Spirit sees it, this is also pretty significant. What you do here is going to really matter in terms of a big life change or life lesson or progression here. So the clarification for the Nine of Swords is the Emperor, the Lovers and the Empress. The Lovers came out first. So the Lovers represent, it can represent a very kinetic, connected, twin flame kind of relationship, very passionate connection between two people. It also often represents needing to make a choice. In fact, in the early tarot decks, this was not called the Lovers, it was called the Choice, and it showed a man standing in front of two women. The implication being that a choice needed to be made that was going to significantly impact the lives of everyone involved. Sometimes it can represent needing to make a choice in a third-party situation, not always. I mean, and often when the Lovers comes up, it doesn't represent, you know, needing to make a choice between two people, although I'm sure there's always people out there for whom this is actually what it's going to be. But it can represent needing to make a choice that will affect this primary relationship, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Sometimes I've seen the Lovers card come up when somebody needed to make a decision about work, career, moving, relocating, which of course would significantly affect their primary relationship too. So the stress, anxiety, and worry is about a choice about a significant or primary relationship, or it's about a choice that's going to significantly affect your life and the life of somebody else. And of course, there's some of you, it might be choosing between two different people. Why? Because of the Empress, because a new beginning needs to happen, and the time is right for this to happen. The Empress is about, well, the Empress is about a lot of things, but she's fundamentally a sign of fertility and sensuality. So what does fertility mean? Fertility means that the time is right, the season is right, the temperature is right, the soil is right for you to plant seeds, cover them up, water them, feed them, and grow them so that they'll eventually sustain you. The Empress is, she is the beautiful balance, the epitome of balancing the tangible, earthly, sensual world and the unseen spiritual world as well. She's the female counterpart to the Emperor, and she kind of softens his very dominant, sort of self-structured and rigid energy. The Empress is, you know, that maternal, she's the traditional earth mother of the tarot. She's also about self-love and self-nurturing and very sensual sort of ways, taking better care of yourself as well. So the time is right for making this choice, making this decision about this relationship or partnership or situation of some kind. The time is right to do that. And there's a lot of stress about it, because I feel like this conversation either hasn't taken place yet, or it hasn't taken place in its entirety the way that it needs to. Like clear, open, honest communication. Not harsh. Even if the truth might be difficult to speak and difficult to hear, we're not about being harsh. We're about saying, this is really where I'm at. This is really how I feel. And this cannot continue in the same way, because I need to move forward and have this new beginning. The time is right to have a new beginning, whether it's the transformation of this relationship or us separating, you know, going our separate ways so that I can have a new beginning somewhere else. Because it feels like there's too much uncertainty and confusion and fears, whether they're realistic or not, around not only the relationship, but if you have this conversation, what will be the consequences of it. But feeling very burdened, and I think that you have been for some time in this relationship, and I feel like the reason you've been burdened is because you're not speaking, you're not saying what you need to say. We have the Moon here. And actually for this, because I usually do 2 cards per week, but I often read them up and down. But sometimes I read them side to side too. Well, I mean, you kind of always look at the whole thing, but sometimes it works a little better one way than the other, and spirit and intuition guides you in that. We have the Moon here, which is a card of things stirring in your subconscious, deep spirituality, the visceral feeling in the pit of your stomach. It's also a card that can represent not having enough clarity, or things being a little cloudy, uncertain, not clear. Fears which may or may not be reality based. For example, The moon. Things look very different under the light of the moon than they do under the light of the sun. There's a lot of deep subconscious stirrings, wolves howling at the moon. You get all those feelings. But things look different under the moon. When the moon comes out, it does shed some light. So does the sun. But when the sun comes out, it illuminates everything. When the moon comes out, it illuminates things only to a certain degree. There's a lot of shadowy corners and hidden recesses and nooks. And also you see things in the dark that can appear to be big and frightening, or like a monster. But in the light of day, it's just that gnarly old tree out in your backyard. It's not really a gigantic monster or bear that it looks like, under the light of the moon, because it's in shadow. So this can represent subconscious fears, pressure, subconscious fears, uncertainty, cloudiness, confusion. But it's sitting next to the King of Swords, who is somebody who does not operate well with this energy of the moon. Swords is air energy, mental energy. This is about illumination, clarity, wisdom, belief systems, thoughts. Kings and queens represent individuals who have mastered their suit. They are at the top of their game, meaning that they have mastered the character traits, personality traits, which are common to their suit, meaning that they've grown and matured and evolved beyond the young, immature energy of the pages, the spontaneous, impulsive energy of the knights, and now they're kings and queens. So they've reached a point of self-balance, control, and mastery over these personality and character traits. So the King of Swords, smart, if not educated, intelligent. He's clear thinking and clear seeing. He feels emotions just as much and just as deeply as anybody else, but he often doesn't necessarily show them, and he does not tend to make impulsive, spontaneous decisions that are fueled and driven by emotion, because he wants to look at what the reality is, what the facts, what the practicality is, and he will make the best decision based on that. The King of Swords has sometimes been known to sacrifice his own emotions or feelings on the altar of what is best, because that is truth and reality. So it's very clear thinking. He's a very good communicator, very clear, very concise, very honest. He's all about truth and insight and illumination and clarity. The opposite of the energy of this moon. Now, the Ten of Wands, burdens, tend to represent cycles ending or something needing or cycling to a close or a culmination point. And this is a heavy burden, a heavy burden. You've been carrying it successfully, probably for quite some time, but it's so heavy you can't stand up straight. It is time. It is time. We're at the 10 here. It is time to lay this burden down, stand up and take a deep breath. And I think you're just about there. You can see the destination. And again, the Emperor speaks of the time is right. The time is fertility. It's fertile. It's now. The time is right to bring this burden to an end. And then next to the Ten of Wands, we have the Eight of Wands as a card often associated with travel, with communications, with messages going back and forth, conversation and communication happening, which is what I'm getting quite strongly. So there's this fear and uncertainty, maybe confusion, stress and anxiety. I need to speak my whole truth, my complete truth about this relationship, and something needs to happen one way or the other. There is going to be a new beginning, a transformation. But I feel like as long as it's staying in your head, all of this stuff is staying in your head, and it gets big and built up and huge in your head, Cancer. And I feel like you may not have spoken your truth or have spoken the entire truth of how you feel about this relationship. Maybe you're afraid that if you asked for more or said, these are what my wants and needs are, I'm not happy with or content with things the way they are, maybe the person would say, well, I can't do that, and then the relationship ends, and you've been keeping quiet because you feared that consequence, or you were trying to avoid that, or you didn't want to hurt the other person or cause conflict. But meanwhile, all this stuff is swirling around and around in your head. This conversation, this communication which needs to take place, he's carrying that. He's still keeping it all to himself. There's no other person in this. He's keeping all of this to himself, and it needs to come out. And it needs to be to banish the lack of clarity. We need to bring clarity and banish the clouds and the fears and just get it out once and for all, which is what the King of Swords would do. And I feel like that's your advice here. This conversation and communication needs to take place so you can lay down this burden one way or another. You need to be very clear, honest, open, and concise. Compassionate too, but concise. You need to speak all of your truth and say this is where it's at, because I'm not happy with things the way that they have been, the way that they are, and I don't think you are either. So this you know, this conversation needs to take place, and it's the right time. I think the last half of June, and you know, timing's always a bit fluid and tricky. Could be, you know, a little before, a little after. I usually record these videos a few days before I post them. So yeah, and the last half of June, maybe even the first part of July, this is a really good time for this to happen, so that we can cut these swords down. We can get rid of this burden, even if it's a relationship that ends because of this or doesn't continue to go forward. Then after a healing period, you can be in a place where you can have exactly the kind of relationship that is best for you, and vice versa. Or this conversation can kind of help clear the air, as difficult as it might be, in order for there to be some transformation and new beginnings within the relationship. But it does need to happen. So Cancer, that pretty much wraps up your June 2019 mid-month general reading. I hope that you know, I sometimes say that I often say at the end of a reading, I hope you enjoyed this reading, but there's some readings you just can't say that, because some of them, they look difficult or challenging, because life is sometimes. But I always hope that it's helpful and useful to you. You know, I feel so strong. The feelings I get about the advice I'm getting about having this conversation and speaking all of your feelings and truth within the bounds of compassion, of course. I almost feel like beating over the head with it, that the advice that I'm getting is so strong. But of course, as I always say, we live in a free will zone. You can, you know, if you choose not to do this, I think this feeling will, I don't, you know, it might prolong things, but the thing that also gets prolonged are the feelings and the energies that these cards represent. And I think it's time. I think it's past time. I think Spirit is saying it is now time to just lay all the cards out on the table, so to speak. No pun intended. Well, a little pun intended. All right, Cancer, so I hope that you find that helpful and useful. Again, if any of you are interested in scheduling a personal reading with me, particularly if these videos resonated for you, you can feel free to email me directly at maggie1mcguire@gmail.com. I would be most happy to work with you. I do love and romance, of course, relationship compatibility charting, career, work, and finance, investment readings, gift readings for friends, family, and loved ones. I do 6 and 12-month overviews, which take a look at what's coming in all the main areas of your life over the next 6 or 12 months, depending on how far ahead you want to look. And those are pretty useful. And I also do a variety of general readings where we can look at whatever you want to, from time frames of 15 minutes up to an hour and a half. So there's a variety of things to choose from for those of you who are so inclined. So I will see you all again, Cancer, in a couple of weeks for the July 2019 general readings. Isn't this year it just seems to go faster and faster every year? I think it's just because we're getting older and the time becomes more valuable. I'm sure that the time itself doesn't change. Anyway, I'll see you guys again in a couple of weeks for the July, first half of July general readings. And until then, as always, I wish you joy, peace, blessings, and a happy life. Take care. Bye-bye.